Welcome, everyone. My name is Trista Montgomery. I'm a biology professor over at VCSU, and I'm helping out with the North Dakota Envirothon training videos. And this one is specifically on the use of dichotomous keys. You will likely be given a dichotomous key or two of some kind during the Envirothon for various purposes, whether you're identifying invertebrates or animals or plants. So this one is geared a little more towards plants because that's my specialty. So a dichotomous key is used in various branches of biology in order to quickly identify, usually a plant or animal species. It contrasts two characteristics of plants, for example, and divides your potential options into smaller and smaller groups until you end on a particular group or a single species. And remember, the die in dichotomous key means two, so you're always choosing between two options. So die meaning two, you're choosing one of two options as you go down a list of options. One thing that you need to note is, now, in order to effectively use a dichotomous key, you do need to know various morphological characteristics. So, for example, in plants, you'll likely need to know, where to find leaves, nodes, and buds. So a node is a location where a leaf comes off of the stem, and there's axillary buds that can become flower buds, lateral buds for new shoots or stems. And then you'll also need to know some leaf anatomy. For example, a petiole is the stalk of a leaf. The blade is that laminar portion that's usually aimed towards catching the sunlight. So here's some various aspects of leaves that you are more than welcome to pull aside and study. And you'll also want to know leaf arrangement along a stem. So whether those leaves are arranged alternately up and down the stem, or if you have two leaves opposite of one another, or a whorled pattern. You'll also want to know how to tell the difference between a simple or a compound leaf. So on the right, some people might think that these are 5 separate leaves on a stem, but they're actually not. It's one single compound leaf. And the good way to tell that is to look for that axillary bud along the stem. So that axillary bud, again, can become a flower bud, a new lateral shoot, another leaf. It has various options it can become if it needs to, but when you see an axillary bud, that is the beginning of the leaf, and then you have the petiole leading up to the leaf blade. So for the compound leaf, if you see an axillary bud here, then that means that that is one whole leaf, and it's leaflets on a compound leaf. If you do have compound leaves or even simple leaves, those compound leaves have specific types of arrangements, and you can study these as well. And you'll want to know leaf shapes. Linear, an example would be grasses or willows will have linear leaves. Cordate is a common one. You'll see this with cottonwoods. And then lastly, leaf margins. I would say entire, you want to know that basically just means a smooth leaf margin on the outer edge of the leaf. And then dentate and serrate are common. Doubly serrate is one that you'll find in certain species like birch. And then I do have one more to mention here. For plants specifically, you'll see something called trichomes, and those are leaf hairs or hairs along the outer edge of typically leaves, but also stems. And so there's various terms that will be used depending on if this plant doesn't have any hairs, or if it does have lots of hairs, it's pubescent. Lacking hairs is glabrous. If it has a waxy covering, that's called glaucous, and you can see that on the left with certain sages. So these are just some examples of some terms that are really useful in making sure that you know the characteristics before you go to your dichotomous key. So let's go to a worksheet that you'll have available to you that helps you practice using a dichotomous key. These little guys are called Quozes. They're just fictional characters, but it makes it kind of fun to run through this dichotomous key. They're cute little guys. But we do need to learn some characteristics of these Quozes before we can go down to the dichotomous key and go through our dichotomous options down here. So first we have something called a phren up on the top of his head. The phren is one bump. So I think of these side bumps here as his cheeks. And then that one single bump on top of this guy is one phren. So for example, this guy at number 2 on the right has one phren on the top of his head. Number 1 on the right here has multiple phrens. And number 7 on the right here has a split head. He has no phrens. He has a split head. That's probably the most confusing of the characteristics of the Quozes. Otherwise, the rest are pretty self-explanatory. We've got bristles, we've got cilia, the caudus is his tail, the body is his big belly here with a belly button, and here's his head. So let's take number 2 on the right. We'll scroll down to the dichotomous key, and we have 2 options starting with A. We've got A up at the very top, and this is called an indented version of a dichotomous key. We'll look at another version next, but first this indented version starts with A at the top, and then you follow all the way down till you see double A on the same column here. So between A, the specimen has a friend head, and double A, the specimen has a split head. If we're looking at number 2, Quoz number 2 on the right here, we can see that he has a friend head. He has one bump on the top of his head. So we're going to stick with A, specimen has a friend head, and we're going to go down to B. Now we see B and double B, or BB. So we're going to choose between specimen has a single phren or the specimen has multiple phrens. Well, we can see in number 2 that he has one phren, because remember, these are his cheeks. So he has one phren. Specimen has a single phren on head. We're going to stay with B. We're not going to follow BB. So from B, we're going to move down to C and CC. Specimen has a single caudus or specimen has more than a single caudus. Well, the caudus is the tail, and I see one tail or one caudus. So I'll go back to C. Specimen has single caudus. So now we're going to disregard everything below CC, and we're just going to stay under C. We're going to move to D or DD. D, body pattern present. Well, yep, or I'm sorry, whoops, body pattern absent. Well, he has a body pattern. He has some dots on his body. So DD, body pattern present. E or EE. E says pattern is asymmetrical. EE says pattern is symmetrical. Well, if I draw a line straight down through the middle of his body, I can see that we have mirror images of these dots. So the body pattern is symmetrical in this case. So we move down finally to F or FF. We've got a spotted pattern or a lineated pattern. In number 2, in Quoz number 2, we have a spotted pattern. So now we have finally come to a single specimen. This is a binomial nomenclature here. So 2 names for this species. The genus is Sylvestris, and the species or the specific epithet is Spoticus. Now, sometimes these species names are very descriptive. Spoticus, he has spots on his belly. Sometimes they might be named after a location or the person who discovered them. So we now know that Quoz number 2, his species is Sylvestris spoticus, and that would be our answer. So this was an example of an indented version of a dichotomous key. There is another version, the non-indented version. It's the same idea. You are still choosing between two options, but your two options are right next to each other. So we'll start with number 1. If a specimen has a friend head, go to number 2. If a specimen has a split head, go to number 19. So we know our specimen has a friend head, so we will go to number 2. Now that we're at number 2, we have our two options. If specimen has one friend, go to number 3. If specimen has more than one friend, go to number 5. So he has only one friend, as we saw before. So we are going to go to number 3. So on and so forth. So you'll follow the step-by-step, choose one option or the other, and follow the directions to the next number until you have reached, presumably, Sylvestris spoticus, since we already identified this one. So the quozes are down here at the bottom of the worksheet. You're welcome to print this out if you like. Otherwise, there's some more questions in here to learn about dichotomous keys. This chart right here, you enter in which letters you used in the indented version of the dichotomous key. So follow that we did A, then B, then C, all the way down to F. So I hope that was helpful in learning how to use dichotomous keys. You'll have this worksheet available to practice with, and then make sure that you brush up on your morphology, which just means the overall shape. So the morphology and shape and characteristics of various plants and animals, so that when you get a dichotomous key, you are able to follow those characteristics and better identify your specimen. Thank you, everybody.